Nikola Jokic and Serbia once again get a dominating win versus Finland. Poor Lauri Markkanen. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about the differences between the NBA and Eurobasket and European ball and why it is that it's difficult to translate concepts between the two, or is it? Plus, Adam hates America. This is Locked On Nuggets.
You are Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Serbia, as Lycos in our YouTube chat says. This is Locked On Nuggets, your daily Denver Nuggets podcast, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. Thanks for joining us and making us part of your day and your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, where you can join Lycos and Zamora and Flo and Rayvon and Alexander Pavicevic. Close, I think, in the chat comments. Always a good time rolling with us on Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. On today's show, we're going to talk, it's the offseason. Teams have not started filtering in. We don't have Muscle Watch. So we're going to talk a lot about Eurobasket today. And we're going to talk a lot about the differences in the NBA and Eurobasket. We're going to touch on also a concept. Adam had a tweet this morning that I thought was really interesting. It made me go, wait, but, no, I think he's got a point. And so we're going to talk about that. Talk about all that and more. And we start as a table setter with Nikola Jokic and Serbia getting another dominating win versus Finland. How are we going to do this when it's like a couple of years and it's the Olympics and we're having to do this for Serbia and Canada, which I'm going to feel bad if we're not doing this for all the Nuggets players. Like
we're not doing it for Vlatko Čančar.
That's true. We're not, and honestly, we're not giving Vlatko enough credit. We're not giving Vlatko, like, he's been great in Eurobasket so far. Although Slovenia losing to Serbia or Bosnia the other day was weird. So Nikola Jokic has a look. They clobbered Finland. Like, they annihilated that team.
They played great.
I thought Lauri Markkanen played awesome for Finland, and it didn't matter a bit.
Yeah, I want to know. You messed with every single center on the opposing team for some reason, and I'm not saying there's a reason. I'm not saying there's a hidden motivation.
Oh no! I liked Harms.
Good. Harms, very impressed. Markkanen, Serbia up 30 both games.
I liked Harms when Jokic wasn't in. As soon as Jokic was in, then it was like I didn't like Harms at all. I said this on Twitter. I'm shopping potential replacement candidates for DeAndre Jordan. So I'm trying to make it clear that how many players in the world are better center options than DeAndre Jordan. This is not at all about that because, and look, I wind up, I'm an agitator and I'm definitely by nature against domination. And so when Serbia is like clocking this team, my natural pull is to be like, well, look, the other team's got some good guys too. But it was awesome. Like,
well, they're also in the weakest group by far. Like, they got the luckiest draw, or maybe unlucky, to be honest with you, because they're going to go from untested to like elimination round, and it's going to be weird. But they have, like, I'm watching these other games, and there are a bunch of teams that I haven't been impressed with. They're just none in the Serbia's group.
Okay, so that's good to know because, like, when I'm watching this, I'm like, is challenge in Eurobasket at all? Like, is anybody going to be able to like hang?
It's going to be my biggest concern right now for Team Serbia is the fact that they are playing. Their pool consists of 4 of the bottom 8 teams or so in this entire tournament. I haven't actually done the math, so don't check me on that. But four not very good teams that are all likely to lose in the first round of the elimination round. Meanwhile, you have other groups that have like France, Bosnia, Germany, Slovenia, Lithuania, all in the same group. And it's like, yeah, one of those teams, which it turns out most likely Lithuania, is going to get eliminated before they even get to the other round. And Lithuania features multiple NBA players. So it's just Serbia, either lucky or unlucky, depending on your perspective. I actually kind of think it's unlucky they got such an easy group play.
I like this comment from Alexander Pavicevic, who says the first Elim game is called Trap Game in Serbia. Like that. Yeah, so I mean, it's but at the same time, you commented on this yesterday on Twitter about how impressed you are with the other Serbian players, and like
Yeah.
I have to agree. Like these guys know how to play, and they know
They
how
know
to
how to
play
play.
together. And there's just very few moments of confusion offensively or like freelance isolation. I'm gonna get mine. There's not a lot of that, and I want to talk about that in segments 2 and 3. So I think there's like all these kind of things to dive into, and as far as that goes, but I do want to definitely give Serbia a lot of credit for I like as a non-Eurobasket expert, but as somebody that covers the NBA, I've been very impressed with how Serbia has played.
Me too, man. The ball pops. The defense has been very impressive, although there's interesting. I do think some of the defensive rules in Eurobasket are more interesting and more compelling for my preferred style of basketball than in the NBA. I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
in the NBA, everything gets spread so thin, and it's like impossible to guard anyone.
Yep.
And some of that is talent as well. I want to be clear. The talent in the NBA, because a lot of people have asked me, like, how many games would Serbia win in the NBA? And like, guys, let's pump the brakes here. There's a reason the NBA features the best players in the world. Are there major flaws to it? Absolutely. Like and we're going to talk a lot about those in segments 2 and 3, but some of the shooting and athleticism and stuff, makes it so hard. That's where when we're looking at some of these guys, could they guard a Ja Morant? Could you guard, a LeBron James, like this type of stuff? In the NBA, every team has, or almost every team has one of those guys that like breaks even good team defense. And so it changes things. But nonetheless, I'm with you. I've been impressed with the cohesiveness, how they play so connected, the passing, I want to say, it's funny because I want to say basketball IQ, but I don't know if it is or if it's just the willingness to employ that basketball IQ. That's honestly a question I have. I don't know.
Yeah.
But they play that way, at least really smart, unselfish style. And it's fun to watch. The thing I posed to you, though, Matt, was to me, it's like March Madness in the offseason. That's what I just tweeted out. And I might even go as far as to say I'm a basketball purist. March Madness has the tradition. People are more connected to it here in the U.S. because they know the backstory of Kansas and Kentucky and Duke and North Carolina. They know those stories inherently. They don't know those necessarily, about Europe and the history with basketball there. But the basketball, I care about the basketball. The basketball quality to me is just so much higher. So it's like this fun March Madness-esque tournament in the dead of the offseason with what I perceive to be better basketball. And I'm kind of surprised. I just wonder if you feel the same way about it or even similarly at all about it.
When you posted that this morning, I had woken up and was checking my phone and was kind of like, I blanched immediately and was like, oh, come on. And then like I thought about it and I was like, well, yeah. And then I really thought about it. I think he's got a point. And I don't want to be so American centric that I'm, oblivious to these kind of angles. Like if you ask somebody like, what makes March Madness great? Oh, the crowds, the fans are so into it. Are they going in the tunnel to fight the man? Because that's what's happening to Furkan Korkmaz is
Wild
the other players
story,
and the
by the
guards
way.
are fighting him. Now, I'm not saying that's a good thing. It's not. It's not. Please don't fight the players. But like the fans are absolutely, the environments are really good. Even like one thing that you can tell is like the difference in how production for the NBA, like how the game is presented, and as far as like the crowd mics and stuff like that.
Totally.
But like the crowds are great; they're super into it. There's obviously like the national pride aspect of fandom. As far as the actual basketball goes, I mean, look, I've often my most famous tweet, the most liked and retweeted tweet for me of all time is somebody asked me, why isn't the NBA playing today on the day of the national championship? And I replied, 2 groups of children are getting together to miss jumpers. And that's my most liked tweet of all time. And
I hate college basketball so much.
Do what?
I said I hate college basketball so much. I'm with you.
Which is funny because like you love the tournament. Like
I do love the tournament. The drama is fun.
Yeah. You went to the bar last year for the tournament, I assume, right?
I think so. I'm sure I did. I don't remember it.
Before the bar, you used to have folks over to your awesome basement, which is like my dream basement with all the TVs to watch all the games. It's amazing. And it's like such an American experience. And there's and like the plucky underdogs and all these types of things. But I think part of it is one of the things that hits I would make on Eurobasket is how wide the gap seems to be in some of these games. But then when I was thinking about that this morning, I was like, well, that's part of it though, is no one can be good enough in college to get separation, which is why you have the
Yes, and
University of Colorado Pueblo
right.
like hanging with whatever. Is that nobody's good enough to create separation. In Eurobasket, like the good programs are substantially better than the ones at the bottom, right?
No, yes, but I will say the trick of March Madness is that it's a single elimination from the start. Slovenia just lost to Bosnia yesterday. Bosnia is not very good. Slovenia is a favorite to win it all, and they lost. Now, it was only pool play, so it doesn't actually matter. But if you had no pool play and you just went straight into a tournament like this, same thing. You would have 2 or 3 top seeds that lost to teams they had no business losing to, and that's how it would work.
Yeah, or Luka Doncic is a fraud. Just one or the other. Like one or the other is an option.
That's how we would definitely talk about it if this was the case. But to me, that's the thing. March Madness it's not a gimmick because it's tradition and it's fun, but single elimination, crazy things happen. And that's what makes March Madness so fun. Games come down to the wire, big shots happen, what have you. But I just have enjoyed this tournament because you could see there's been some very competitive games, interesting style fights. There's different styles that are more so than even in the NBA, although I think the NBA has been sneaky better about this over the last 5 years. There's more stylistic diversity in the NBA than typical. Yeah. But in Eurobasket, you see some real stylistic differences, and it's just fun to watch. Like, okay, your program versus this program, different philosophies. Let's see which one wins.
I had an NBA PR member ask me this a couple of years ago. I remember a team PR member asked me, "You're always tweeting about the WNBA. Is that like real? Like, do you actually watch it, or are you just doing it for the likes?" And I told him, I was like, no. Like, but first of all, I don't do anything to get liked. If I was trying to be liked, I would be much different on Twitter. But 2, like, I'll say this, like, I genuinely like the WNBA style of play better. Like, me personally, I like how the WNBA plays because it's all about passing, and that's I love passing. And that's been like, I'm at this weird inflection point because if you say like Euro ball relies a lot on like quality passing and sharing the ball. And that's one of the reasons like I've really enjoyed watching the tournament. Like I watching Eurobasket. Like it's been really fun, the games that I've seen. I've really enjoyed watching it because of the way that they share these styles, which gets us to our next segment, which we'll get to here in a minute, which is we're going to talk about the differences between European basketball, international basketball, I think is probably a better way to say it, and which is heavily, I think, European influenced.
But it does include teams like Brazil and Argentina and yeah, that's good.
And the NBA. And the idea of why or why not the Nuggets could play like Serbia. And the key for me is that this is the tease, why there's a difference between basketball and the NBA. We'll talk about that next on Locked On Nuggets. But first, I've got to tell you about Built Bar. It's that time. It is that time, folks. It's time for Built Bar. If you haven't tried the new cookie dough chunk puff, you are missing out. It's absolutely incredible. Light and chewy texture, real cookie dough chunks, but not big ones. That's not going to hurt your teeth. They're nice and small. It's very easy to eat, and yet it's very delicious. Covered in 100% real chocolate. Built with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and contains tons of health benefits. The whole thing, just 160 calories and a whopping 15 grams of protein. Absolutely incredible. Everyone I've talked to in the Locked On family has said that the Built Bar Puffs, the cookie dough chunk puffs, are one of their absolute favorites. Where's it rank for you, Adam?
Probably number 1. It's really good. It honestly is like it's tied for number 1 at least with churro.
So in Adam's heart, it is the Serbia of Built Bar of Built Bars. Whether you need a snack for your workout, a late night treat, or just want to grab a quick bite, Built is a perfect protein bar, and they taste better than a candy bar. Ditch the calories, fat, and sugar, and grab yourself a Built Bar. Just go to Built.com and use promo code LOCKEDON15. We got a new promo code, LOCKEDON15, LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your order. That's LOCKEDON15 for 15% off at Built.com. We'll be right back on Locked. Nuggets.
All right, so I wanted to bring up this comment from Flo here where he says, have you never been curious in previous international competitions? And it's funny because one, not really outside of the US. I got really into the Redeem Team and Redeem Team 2 or whatever you start calling these, 2008, 2010, 2012. I got really into those teams because obviously the US lost and it was high profile and you want to see like, okay, can they bounce back? But more importantly, it was players. It was Dwayne Wade and LeBron James and guys that at that time, Kobe Bryant, guys at that time that I really liked watching, like as just as a fan of the game, which is, I think, kind of interesting and pertinent to our next conversation because my entry point to Eurobasket is Jokic, not necessarily Team Serbia. It's definitely Team Serbia as well, but it's like Jokic brought me to Team Serbia brought me to Eurobasket. And I think that's different than how European fans access it, where they come to the team first. And I just want to make that distinction because it's going to be pertinent when we get into this next topic.
What's interesting is we're seeing this across the league as more and more European players become not just good players. Like, no one was going to be going wild for players like Nikola Mirotic in Eurobasket. It wasn't the same kind of deal. But Dallas is going through exactly what we're experiencing with Slovenia.
With Luka, yep.
Yeah, like Luka has brought them there, and they're all rooting for Slovenia in these things. And if you ask me, like I have watched it periodically. I haven't like taken a lot of interest in like really detailed stuff. It's more
Right.
like I would look at it from an NBA perspective. Like, how's Marc Gasol looking? You know, like how are various players looking in these international competitions? Like, what's their body look like? Do they look fresh? And so, like, this is the first time I think that. This is the first time I've definitely watched as much as I have, where it hasn't just been like, oh, there's like a passing game on. Like, I've really tried to like catch like multiple games.
Right. And follow the flow of the whole tournament rather than just kind of catch a game and yeah.
Right. And I think there's a lot to be said here for that translation, and it does lead. Like Adam was, I made a joke yesterday that unintentionally really pissed Adam off, which was. I was joking because what happened was like I logged on and I saw like TJ and Adam and Deb.
All of us who you love and respect very much.
Yeah, all love and respect very much. Raving about Serbia because they were beating the ever-loving crap out of Finland. And I tweeted like, in January, Nuggets media is going to be asking why the Nuggets can't play like Serbia. And it was just like, it was a light troll. It was a troll. You're often telling me I'm a troll. It was a light troll. I'll admit that. But what I think we touched on something when we started texting about it, which was I think an actually interesting discussion. And it brings me to this point. I am at the point after so much analysis of both. What got me here was studying how teams make the playoffs, which is not, well, you're a good team. No. How good you are does not necessarily determine your seeding in the NBA playoffs. It's your ability, and it's the stuff I always preach about. It's gaming the system. It's beating teams at home, teams under 500, and your division opponents. There's a formula. There's honestly a formula that if you prioritize certain games over others in the course of an 82-game season, which everyone's exhausted, you'll come out ahead. But it goes further than that into the style of play, which is that to me at this point, Adam, and I think this is a real issue, is that the NBA, because so much competitive advantage has been squeezed out of it, there's basketball and then there's the NBA. And I'm not sure that if we talk about the pure concept of basketball, the WNBA, Eurobasket, international basketball, even to a degree college basketball, aren't closer to basketball than the NBA is. Would you agree?
I mean, they're all so different, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. I mean, what is real basketball? It's evolved so much over 100 years that what's the real version versus that? I mean, I still think the NBA is the top level of it. But as I mentioned earlier, there have been an evolution of culture and rules that have made the NBA be something of like a very unique version of basketball, more unique than what you're saying. Like if you compare WNBA, Eurobasket, and college, they might fit closer together in the stylistic clumping than the NBA. So sure. I mean, it's meaningfully different in important ways that change the way the NBA game is played and why it's difficult, though, in my opinion, not impossible, that the Nuggets could borrow certain things from the success that Team Serbia has had so far. Although we should mention the elimination round, Serbia could lose round one, and then we're going to look like fools saying, "Oh, look at how great they are."
Yeah, and I think the question of the way that the international style is, which is a lot of passing and fundamentals. Like, it was, I think, third quarter yesterday where I forget who the Serbian player was, forgive me, but he basically ISO'd on the left block and took a fadeaway turnaround jump shot out of the post. And it was striking to me, and he missed it. And Joker got the one-handed putback because Joker's a monster.
Oh, I know the player you're talking about.
And what struck out to me, though, was like you see very little of that outside of like specific players, I feel like.
I'm going to disagree with you on that specific play, though, because that shot came as the result of a very good possession, and that offensive rebound came as a result of that very good possession as well. Like, the defense had to scramble so much that Jokic was able to pin the guy under the hoop. So when the guy took the shot, it was like, hey, shoot it, because even if you miss, the odds of us getting an offensive rebound are extremely high. So,
that's right. Fair enough. I guess what I'm more meaning to say is there's just not as much. I don't know how else to say this. Maybe I was gonna pin it on one player, and that's unfair. Isn't some of the difference here the difference between real hooper basketball and basketball and team basketball? Like, isn't that a little bit of this?
I mean, it's definitely that's like a reduction that maybe even comes with a little bit of baggage. So, like, all of this, I think, comes with a certain amount of baggage that we obviously want to like be aware of and conscious of. But here's the thing. When you're playing for a couple differences. Number one, in international basketball, the coach is the leader of the team and has this authority that the NBA coaches do not. That's an important distinction. And a lot of that has to do with money. Like, these guys, I don't know that they're making money. I don't think that they are. But either way, they're not making 100 times more than their coaches or what have you to be participating in these. So in the NBA, that's not the case. Michael Malone might make $2, $3, $4 million. Nikola Jokic makes $170 million. Like, there's an enormous gap between the power that the players have and the influence that they have and the authority that they have versus in these international competitions. Number two, in the international competitions, you have guys that all have the same like cultural background, country background, and they're playing for the sense of pride of like, hey, we're doing this against the other countries, but this is our country. And it can have through lines, by the way, for decades. One of the things of the stories I want to tell with the DNVR documentary I'm working on is, hey, some of these guys, they're together from 86, 87, 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95. Like, it goes this long-term thing. You think about the Spanish national team or the Argentinian national teams. They didn't just come together for a summer and play. They were decades in the making. So you have that chemistry. You have that everybody rowing in the same direction. There's no money involved in the way that this is. And it makes things, before you even get to the stylistic preferences, it just makes it easier to know, hey, we're all rowing in the same direction in ways that the NBA is set up not to work that way.
That's a really great point. There's also, I think I've converted so much from being a guy that loved 82 games to wanting less basketball, which everyone's like, why do you want less basketball? And one of the reasons is if you have all of these possessions in the course of a basketball game across 82 games, you're going to get, there is creep of personal agenda of, I'm in a contract year. We're up 15. I'm going to take a few shots here. Right. And then it's like, all of a sudden and then it kind of devolves from there and it creates tension. And then there's like politics, like the NBA, like it's everyone. I'll say this, like people enjoy the drama aspect of it. Not everyone, but like a general comment about the NBA is that the drama side of it is very popular. It draws a lot of attention for people like you and me that prefer the basketball side of it. It's playing to a certain degree, right? Like this is part of the tension. And I think this is where the league has gone too far. Is the league's like, wow, people really like the drama side. So let's like lean into that. And everyone that watches the sport nightly is like, but it's a sport and not a soap opera. So we could just like focus on the good play. And I think it is a tension point, but it also, there is all of these kind of mechanisms. I want to take a break. When we come back, I want to keep talking about this subject because I think it's really interesting. I think Adam's thoughts on it are really smart. And I want to go back to the coaching thing for a second because there was a comment earlier in the comment section in our live show on YouTube, which you can join, that I want to get to. We'll do that when we come back on Locked On Nuggets. Back here on Locked On Nuggets, thanks for joining us, making us part of your day, your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including ye old YouTubes, where you can join the show. Just check the subscribe box and hit notifications. We have had so many 5-star reviews. So proud of you guys. So proud of you guys. I'm almost ready to say the Broncos tagline. Think they're going to get a win this week. Very excited for them as this NFL season begins. Keep hitting us with those 5-star reviews. We need more of those. Otherwise, I start talking about the other team. Damiano said this earlier, and I want to kind of comment on it. It's not that, like, it's a snarky comment, but there's stuff to dig out here. He says, I sure hope people are seeing the difference between Malone and a real coach. Now, that's a very, derogatory comment about Michael Malone. What's interesting, though, is as we talk about the idea, because this gets back to the core question we were talking about as we began the segment of why or why not Denver can or cannot play like Team Serbia, right? And I'll say this, I do think it kind of, this conversation is great because I think it paints a lot of some of the stuff you and I have talked about for years in a new light, where it's like Michael Malone does not, will not, maybe cannot coach the basketball principles that are being expressed in Eurobasket play by Serbia. Like everyone sharing the ball and doing all these types of things, right? And from that perspective, I think that's been a disappointment for you throughout the last couple of years. As great as the Nuggets have been, you've consistently been I wish they would share the ball. I wish the ball would pop more.
Here's how I would phrase it, Matt. I've always thought if the Nuggets are going to win a title in the Jokic era, they're going to have to mimic the 2014 Spurs, which is a rare example of a team that did play this style of basketball where everybody just seemed to be on a string and there was no lead dog. Even that game, who would you say was the best player? I would say Tim Duncan, but not everything was about Tim Duncan in that team the way it was in 2007 and 2005. It was still a little bit more egalitarian. So to me, I've always said that the Nuggets to win have to be able to mimic that. And when you watch Team Serbia, you're like, that's a team that does mimic that, at least at this stage of play.
And so I think that a good question here is, forgive me for not knowing this, and I'm ignorant, and I'm totally owning it.
Totally.
Coach of Serbia.
Coach Pesic.
I'm sorry?
Coach Pesic.
All right,
and he's a historic coach, by the way. He is a guy that has – is that what you were getting into?
No, go ahead.
He is a guy with an enormous amount of accolades. He even won a Eurobasket for Team Germany during the moment in time when Serbia was not allowed to play, or at that point Yugoslavia was not allowed to compete. But he even goes back to 1980, the 80s as a coach. So he's been a guy that is one of the big coaches in Serbian history and Yugoslavian history.
So Coach Pesic obviously has a long history of success, has a lot of accolades, is doing obviously a great job with the Serbian team. I would probably say out the box, it is not certain, but likely that he would probably have less success in the NBA.
Oh, no question.
And that's built off of how the NBA operates. Being an NBA coach is a lot different than these concepts, and you have to do different things, and you have to coach different styles, but you also have to approach so much of it is CEO-ship. It's management of things.
Most of it. You talk to Michael Malone, he would tell you this. Most of his job is not basketball.
Yeah.
Ego management and leadership and those types of things.
Right. And so I think it's optimistic. You mentioned the 2014 Spurs. I think it's probably an encouraging sign that he admires Popovich and tries to emulate him as much as he does. I think Malone wants to be that type of coach. I don't necessarily know that Malone, I think Malone has evolved a lot more towards that style of play than the Van Gundy tree, which he is inherently from. Right. I think he is closer to Popovich than Van Gundy. Not that they're opposite, but in terms of style of play approach, I think personnel, Jokic,
Well, I was
is a
going to
lot
say,
of that.
you have the number one guy in the world. Like part of why I've said, if Jokic was on the 2014 Spurs, I think they'd be even better because he's the ultimate guy to play that system. He's the ultimate player. So naturally, you're already going to be on the scale moving that direction. But I agree with you. Michael Malone is further along than most coaches in terms of what you're talking about.
And navigating that power structure, as you mentioned earlier, is such a key part of it. Like Steve Kerr, I think, is an excellent example of this. Well, Steve Kerr has his players' respect, pushes their buttons, like has enough tension with Draymond to where it's like he's not going to like just back down and get run over, but also manages it because anytime that Kerr talks about anything, he's humble in terms of like, I'm just here. I have Stephen, Draymond, and Clay.
Right.
Like he deflects credit.
But also, Matt, who's responsible for their success? You've got Steph Curry, who's like the most willing superstar to run off ball and not win Finals MVP. You have Draymond Green, who makes sure everybody does this, and you have Steve Kerr. And so you have this. And here's the point: as far as I can tell, in Eurobasket, it's much more of a dictatorship with the coach having the ability to make decisions. In the NBA, it's much more of a I would call it is it, I might screw up this word, a triumvirate, right? Where there's multiple leaders, it's not that it's a democracy where everybody gets a voice. It's that Michael Malone, Nikola Jokic, Jamal Murray, Michael Porter, they all have this sort of like seat at the table to say, how are we going to play? And getting 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 people to say like, hey, we're all going to do this is a lot harder than one guy saying do it or else.
There are overlapping power structures in the NBA.
Yep.
And and it goes even more complicated. And I've talked about this before about it's sometimes about the front office being like, look, we're trying to get something done with a future free agent for this agent represents. So we're going to.
I don't think that's happening with the Nuggets right now, but it absolutely is a component of all of this that's weird and complicates everything.
There's all these like very complicated things that go on behind the scenes.
Which, by the way, this year, Jamal Murray not in a contract year, Michael Porter not in a contract year, Jokic not in a contract year, Aaron Gordon not in a contract year, KCP and Bruce Brown not in contract years. And when we talk about these things being important, that's exactly why. If you have player, I guess Bruce Brown technically has a player option, but he sort of is. But when you have players that are like, hey, you have a different motivation than everyone else, it's hard. It's difficult to say, hey, we need you to not score so much because it's better for us. When it's like, hey, if I score more, I get more money.
I'll also say this. I want to mention this one. Omar, who's pretty negative a lot of the time, says, I'm honestly worried about Bruce Brown off the bench. Not sure Denver's offense is creative enough to take advantage of the strengths without Jokic. So that point about whether or not it's accurate or not, I do want to comment on this. There's also another factor in the NBA, which is the players. We talked about the power dynamic between the coaches making how much money they make on lesser guaranteed contracts and players on much more money on fully guaranteed contracts. Right. But also, like, this is part of the dynamic of you have to also have, and this is not about Bruce Brown because Bruce Brown's a very smart player. You have to have buy-in from the various players on your team to pay attention and actually learn the concepts. Like, there is a specific player on the Nuggets that we know has struggled with the playbook. And I'll say this, like, I don't see a lot of that in Eurobasket. It seems like everybody gets the concepts. Everybody's bought in. Everybody's done the homework, so to speak. Like, this is a difference. If you are, like, lifestyle is part of the NBA as well. That's not good or bad. This is part of it. Right. I want to go back to something you said earlier, which is like you were talking about WNBA and college and Eurobasket and NBA. And you're like, well, they're all different. And like, I really want to talk about this because it's important to me. I want to cop to something. When I was in my like early 20s, like I would even define, like now I look back at myself and be like, you were a basketball xenophobe. Like you look down on these other players. You thought they were lesser. You thought that they couldn't hack it in the NBA when you had no knowledge of anything to know that. And that is all true. I have a much better understanding of all of that now. But I don't want to have a Facu conversation. But my key here with this is when I've maintained this, I have not been like Facu Campazzo is a bad basketball player. That would be stupid. Like that would be the dumbest thing I could say. The NBA is very different from international basketball. I genuinely believe that there are successful NBA players who would struggle in international basketball because it is different. The way it is played is different. And there are very successful international players.
By the way, we've seen this with Team USA. We've seen guys that are better play. Like you'd say, hey, is Gary Payton a bad player? No, but did he struggle, in certain tournaments? Absolutely. So we've seen this before.
Right. And so that to me is like an important distinction here, is just that it's all basketball. And we want to just be like, well, at the end of the day, it's just throwing a leather ball through a hoop. But when you're talking about the competitiveness, the level of competition that these leagues operate at, how you play and your ability to fit to that, like if you with that style of play better than a more talented player, you might have more success. And I think we even see this in the NBA where, and this is like from the real hooper perspective, there are real hoopers that people are like, why are you not better or more highly regarded or successful? That's part of it, is that there's such real hoopers that they're not able to play like PJ Tucker to me is a great example of an NBA player. Like PJ Tucker does like the 5 things that PJ Tucker does at such a high level. And those are not things that would be as valuable, I don't think, in any other, that combination, especially in any other sport.
But this is the thing, is what part of what you're talking about is the NBA has gotten, in some ways, very like almost, it's almost a niche, right? And that's what you're talking about. Hyper specialized. And that's kind of what you're getting at. And I personally think there's some tweaks to the rules that would make the NBA more compelling, but the NBA really likes when Damian Lillard goes for 55 points, even if it takes 25 free throws to get there. So, so we'll see.
I want to wrap this up. This doesn't mean that you don't love the Nuggets. This doesn't mean that you don't like this doesn't mean that, like I said.
Well, here to wrap it up though, Matt, here's what I'll say is that I do think the Nuggets can learn. And part of as I'm doing my Nuggets fan fiction in my own head right now, Jokic has been on his course of learning leadership. The game comes easy to him. It comes naturally to him. He's a genius. I don't even think he knows why he's great sometimes. The leadership part of it is the part that takes time. And part of me hopes that playing under Coach Pesic and also playing for this team and being the leader and just seeing, like when I was at that game in against Greece in Serbia, and I see Bodiroga and all these other Serbian legends sitting around courtside, I couldn't help but think Jokic must be feeling this. Like he must be feeling these guys that all have the eyes on him saying, are you ready to take the mantle? We know you're a great player, but are you ready to take the mantle? And it has to be in his head in some capacity of like, hey, I'm learning lessons here that I can apply to the Nuggets to get them to do what seems like a near impossible task, which is to all sacrifice. And when he said at the end of the year last year, I know we can win a championship. We just have to learn to play together. I know that this is what he's talking about. So my fan fiction is that there are lessons Jokic could come, hopefully through winning a gold here at Eurobasket, which would be just incredible, that he can then take to the Nuggets and say, look, we won against the odds doing this. We can do this here. We've been working towards it slowly. We need to make a big leap this year and turn ourselves into the 2014 Spurs. And we do that, we're going to win a championship this year.
That's great stuff. Great stuff, man. All right, let's go wrap it up for Locked On Nuggets. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you guys tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow. We'll talk about Serbia's game versus Israel, as well as whatever other news comes up from the cycle. Well, maybe we'll get some Instagram muscle watch. I'm ready for muscle watch, man.
It's going to be coming full force here over the next couple of weeks, man, because people don't know this. Nuggets players starting to get back into town.
Yeah.
Like last little vacations coming up, and then you get in for pre-camp and then camp. Training camp is what? 3 weeks away? 3 weeks away.
3 weeks away. I can't even deal with that. Oh my God. That's so great. That's crazy. That's crazy and great. All right. Thanks for joining us. Make sure to hit us with the 5-star reviews. Subscribe to YouTube. You can follow Adam on Twitter at Adam_Mares. In case you don't follow me, I am on Twitter at HB Basketball. If you hate yourself. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you guys again next time.